I thought it was pretty good. There's a lot of new stuff, you know. I can't remember where we were supposed to get those masks. I looked around. I couldn't quite remember where to get them.
Yeah, there are a few sites which I don't have off the top of my head right now, but we can get them to you.
Okay, cool.
I think Stacy sent a link to it in one of her emails.
That's what I would have guessed.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she did.
Are we getting a reverb from everybody? Or am I just getting
Definitely.
it?
I hear it.
Great. Actually, it seems to have gotten better. Whatever was causing it looks like it stopped. All right, let's get started. People will join us as they can. So I'm Steve Latimer. I've been with the PNBOA. I want to say this is my 14th year, something like that. And these sessions that we're doing Zoom as opposed to live on rules, we used to try to do live, but we thought that this kind of cuts on everybody's travel and need to get out of the house and battle the traffic and whatnot. So we try to do this by Zoom. It's a little bit challenging because I kind of put stuff up on a screen and we're going through rules and it's hard for me to see you all. So Yelp if you need help. You know, if you got a question on something, either put it in the chat and Stacy might be able to monitor that, or just speak up and interrupt a little bit, because it'd be great to have interaction here as opposed to just me droning on about rules. The thing I'd like to say most about rules, first and foremost about rules, is you can't be a good referee without them. And actually, I'm going to end up starting my presentation here so that we can get into some of this along the way here. So we're going to talk about Rule 4, Rule 1, and Rule 2 tonight. Rule 4 is definitions, and some would say that this is the most important rule in the rule book, because without understanding what a travel means or what a foul means, it's impossible to kind of be a good play caller. And then the other two probably rules that we would say are most important are Rule 9, which is violations, and Rule 10, which is fouls. So if you only got a limited amount of time to get into your rule book in the first couple of weeks, Rule 4, Rule 9, Rule 10, and then the rest of them kind of follow along after that. Okay. So a little bit about just rules again. Good rules knowledge, you'll become a better play caller. Without laws and people to enforce them, power to enforce them, the natural passion of men would be to revert to war. You can apply this to the basketball court. Without rules, we would have chaos out on the basketball floor. Rules knowledge help officials ensure fair and competitive contests. And it's impossible to accurately call plays without knowing what's legal. Okay, so Rule 4, definitions. And this is my top 10 list, David Letterman-like, for anybody who even knows who David Letterman is anymore. First one, ball location. Rule 4.4, 4-4. The ball is in contact with the player or court. Court is in backcourt if either the player or the ball is in backcourt. So when you see things on over and back, the ball and the player have to get over the backcourt in order for them to be in the front court. So during a dribble from backcourt to front, the ball is in the front court only when the ball and both feet of the dribbler are in the front court. So all 3 points, the ball and both feet are in the front court. And then a ball in flight retains the same location as when it was last contacted the player or the court. So a long pass from the backcourt that's up in the air is still in the backcourt until it touches the front court, until it touches the court or a player or an official in the front court. And that comes into play with things like a 10-second count in the backcourt. I've had 10-second counts go off where the ball is in the air and you've reached 10 and you go 10 on your count and you blow a violation because the ball hasn't obtained front court status yet. And then when is the ball is at the disposal of a player? When it's a control by the thrower or the free thrower and the ball is handled or bounced. And this kind of gets into when a ball is live, which we'll talk about a little bit. Is placed on the floor in a throw-in spot, or is available to the player after a made goal and the official begins his throw-in count. So where you end up having 5 seconds to get the ball in. So when the ball is at the disposal of the player leads to when a ball is considered live or dead. And as we go further, you'll be able to see that. Here's a play pick of a ball that is still, if you assume her left foot is still in the backcourt, that it's not up off the floor there in the backcourt, in fact, hasn't touched the front court yet. Number 3 is still in the backcourt. And similar to the right-hand play, number 3 is still in the backcourt because nothing has kind of crossed over from backcourt to front court. Any questions there?
Yeah, I've been playing basketball for more than 40 years and coaching, and I never knew that. I never knew that all 3 points had to cross the half court line.
When you're dribbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. When you're dribbling. Good. So I'm glad we're learning something here tonight. Okay.
And just
control.
Just to clarify on that too, they can have as long as they have 1 point back, even if it's just the ball, they can take both feet back in the backcourt, correct?
Correct. You are still in the backcourt until all 3 points have touched the front court. So you might see when they're dribbling, they're dribbling and they've got the ball behind them, they're protecting it from the defensive player, and both feet end up in the front court and the ball is still being dribbled in the backcourt. They can go into the backcourt with both their feet again.
One more question with that. What if they're dribbling on the line?
So the line is considered the backcourt.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so control. When is there player control and when there is team control? And this leads to things like when it's a offensive foul and when you can call timeout. So there's player control when the player is either holding or dribbling the ball, a live ball, by definition. And there's team control when there's player control. So the player is dribbling the ball or holding the ball, there's team control. There's also team control when the ball is being passed between teammates. And there's still team control on an interrupted dribble. So the dribbler is dribbling along, the ball gets batted away from them. That's still under the control of the team that had control of the ball along the way. And that comes into play when we're talking about when is it a team control foul versus when it's a common foul that you end up awarding free throws to. Because on a team control foul, there's no free throws. It's just a change of possession. But on otherwise, when there's no team control, you would be shooting free throws if you were in the bonus. And the last point is when a player of a team has disposal of the ball for a throw-in, which frankly is still the player has control at that point in time. You've given the ball to the player to throw in. There is team control at that point in time. And then when does team control end? Ball's in flight during a try or a tap for goal. So the ball's been released. The team control has ended. And there's kind of an exception here. So if the player, there could still be player control. You know what? Excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's still further on this thing. I'm sorry to confuse you here. Okay, and when opponent secures the control of the ball, so obviously there's a team control change there, or the ball becomes dead, right? And when the ball becomes dead, and let's just for this point in time until you get to rule 6, when a whistle blows, okay, the ball has become dead. Okay, so that's the team control rule. We're 2 out of 10 here. What's a foul? Rule 419. A personal foul is illegal contact while the ball is live or on or by the airborne shooter when the ball is dead. Okay, so basically all that's doing, the parentheses, this is just talking about when the player drives and he lets go of the ball goes through the hoop, he's still in the air and he crashes into the defensive player. The ball is technically dead when the ball goes through the basket, but the foul could still occur by the offensive player crashing into the defensive player. But essentially, a personal foul is illegal contact while the ball is live. A common foul, which is a foul, a non-shooting foul. There's an intentional foul, which neutralizes the opponent's obvious advantageous position. Right. So if a player is almost going on a breakaway, you hear these things about like clear path fouls in the NBA. There's no such thing in high school. But similarly, if you kind of reach out and grab a player as he's going by you because he's got you beat to the basket, that would likely be considered an intentional foul because it's neutralizing the opponent's obvious advantageous position. Contact away from the ball, clearly not involved in the play. Opponent clearly not involved in the play. So, kind of hack-a-shack, right? Contact, not legitimate attempt to play the ball designed to stop the clock, which sometimes you'll see at the end of the ball games, where the people will just reach out and grab somebody and foul them. There's been several years where we've had this as a point of emphasis where they want that called as an intentional foul because you're not legitimately trying to play the ball. And excessive contact with an opponent when the ball is alive. So, drive to the basket, go up to block the shot, slam into the opponent as well, could be called an intentional foul. There's degrees here. We're going to end up talking about flagrant foul next year. It could be considered excessive contact, which rises to the level of an intentional foul. And then finally, flagrant foul can be either a personal foul or a technical foul, which kind of means either can happen on a dead ball or a live ball. Violent or excessive in nature. So you can have an intentional foul, which is considered excessive. A flagrant foul is kind of a little further along the spectrum, right? And it's just judgment, right? But it's violent or excessive in nature. Could be considered a flagrant foul. A non-contact foul for unacceptable behavior could be considered flagrant, right? If depending upon the words that are used, if they're bad enough, you could consider this a flagrant foul, which results in an ejection or a disqualification of the player. Okay, and then there's technical fouls, which everybody's all hyped up to be able to do, I'm sure. A foul by a non-player, somebody, a team member, somebody's on the bench who ends up actually reaching out and grabbing somebody would be a technical foul. A non-contact foul by a player, mouthing off, oftentimes. An intentional or a flagrant foul while the ball is dead, except for on an airborne shooter. So if it happens, if a foul occurs while the ball is dead, it would be considered a technical foul. And then a direct technical, there's direct technicals to the head coach. So the head coach specifically is doing one of these things, excessive talking, whatever, inappropriate behavior. He would get a direct technical foul or an indirect technical foul to the head coach due to attack on bench personnel. So the coach is responsible for the people on the bench, including the assistant coaches and the players and their trainer and whoever the heck else might be sitting on the bench. And if they have a technical foul, the coach also gets an indirect technical foul. And the coach, the penalty, which you'll get into in Rule 10, if the coach gets 2 direct technical fouls, he's ejected from the game and needs to leave the premises. Or if he gets 3 technicals of any nature, so 1 direct and 2 indirects, again, he would get ejected from the game. Any questions on that so far?
Is there anything for fans?
So that's a great question. Fans are not the responsibility of the officials. Fans are the responsibility of game management. And you would like to be able to leave that with game management to be able to take care of the fans.
Okay, so parents right behind the coach, doing all the stupid stuff that parents do.
Right.
At some point, if somebody gets really out of control, you would go to whatever gym you're in and say that but there's no impact to the team. You might get the guy escorted out or whatever, but
Normally not.
okay.
Normally not. Because you want to go to game management, and oftentimes that might be the coach, depending on the level of the game that you're in. And you need to tell that coach they need to take care of that. And you can stop the game until that situation is taken care of, until that fan has been removed from the premises. And then you would restart the game at that point in time.
Got it.
I did have a question. What do all technicals or flagrants or intentionals count towards the team total, towards like the bonus and double bonus?
Every single one of them.
Okay.
Right. Just finishing up on the foul rule here. So player control foul, we talked about what causes a player to have player control, dribbling or holding the basketball. So a player in control of the ball or an airborne shooter could have a player control foul. And that ends up being a foul on the player. Any points that had been scored gets wiped off, but there's no free throw shot. It's just a change of possession at that point in time. And a team control foul, similarly, no free throw shot, change of possession. So when a foul occurs, when there's a team control, for instance, when that interrupted dribble is rolling around the floor and the player goes to dive for it and jumps on top of somebody else, that's a foul. It's a team control foul. There would be it would go to the bonus situation, but there would be no free throw shot if they were in the bonus. It would just be a change of possession. And then here's the question that you asked: all personal and technical fouls count toward team fouls to reach the bonus free throws.
Sorry, I don't mean to slow you down, but on the first page, the difference between a personal foul and a common foul?
Kind of don't worry about it. I mean, a personal foul is going to be counted against your individual foul. And so you could have the common foul is just kind of a common foul that happens during the game. It's not a technical, it's not an intentional, it's not a flagrant, but all fouls are going to be personal in the sense of counting against your limit of 5 for the game.
And your 1/2 limit of team fouls.
Well, they all count toward a team foul. So the intentional foul counts toward a team foul, the technical foul counts toward a team foul, the personal foul counts toward a team foul. Okay. The common foul counts toward the team foul.
For 1-on-1 purposes.
For 1-on-1 or 2 shots, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the common foul is just a type of personal foul. You have a shooting foul, you have a common foul. Those are all personal fouls.
Oh, okay. All right, got it. Thank you.
All right, guarding.
Sorry for all the questions.
I love having the interruptions, frankly. It's as opposed to just talking to my screen. So closely guarded, 6 feet or less, right? So when we're talking about, we'll talk later on violations about what a dribbler needs to do or what somebody holding the ball needs to do within a 5-second period of time. Closely guarded is considered 6 feet or less. And if you're wondering what 6 feet is, it's basically from the foul line to the top of the circle of the on one end of the court, or from the center court line to the edge of the circle on a jump ball is 6 feet. Okay, and they measure it by kind of the front of your foot. Now, none of us are out there with a ruler or anything along the line, and I'd say generally speaking, we're kind of bad at counting closely guarded at 6 feet. We probably make it more like 4 feet, but closely guarded is 6 feet or less. Okay, the key on guarding is legal guarding position. A lot of things flow from this, whether it's a player control foul or if it's a defensive foul. A lot has to do with whether there's legal guarding positions, and this is kind of crashes in the lane and other things along those lines. So in order to obtain legal guarding position, 2 feet on the playing floor, in bounds, front of the torso facing the opponent. So get your feet down on the floor, front of the torso facing the opponent. Key to knowing who is causing the contact is knowing whether the defender has reached legal guarding position. It'll come to you over time, but it's something that you want to be thinking about, looking for when you're looking at plays and refereeing. And then once you obtain legal guarding position, how do you maintain it? Feet can be on the floor or in the air at that point in time. You don't need to be facing your opponent anymore. For, if the guy's coming down the lane and you like shy away and you turn away to be able to absorb the blow, that's still leaving you in legal guarding position. You can move laterally or obliquely, backwards, sideways, or whatever. You just can't be moving forward. And you can raise your hands or jump within your vertical plane. Again, so your feet don't need to be on the floor. And that would be maintaining legal guarding position. Happens for the drives down the lane, happens just kind of outside when the defender's trying to stay in front of his the ball handler dribbler. And there again, can turn a duck to absorb the contact. Okay, so a couple of things. So guarding an opponent with the ball or an opponent who's not moving. So we're talking about time and distance, right? So no time and distance is required to obtain legal guarding position. If you get to 2 feet on the floor, torso facing your opponent, before the contact occurs, that contact is the responsibility of the opponent. You have obtained legal guarding position at that point in time. If the opponent's airborne, you've got to get there before the opponent leaves the floor. And again, this is key when you're driving to the basket. So as long, he's driving to the basket, he's gathered, but his foot's still on the ground. You get to legal guard, you get to in front of them, 2 feet on the floor, facing the opponent, you have gotten to legal guarding position. But if he's already up in the air, you can't slide over there and obtain legal guarding position.
Hey, Steve, I'm going to jump in here real quick.
Yep.
I don't know how many of you were there on Thursday, but remember when I told you when you're refereeing, you want to watch mostly the defender and a little bit of the offensive player. This is why, because you have to know if the defender was where he needed to be or she needed to be before a player went into the air. So this all kind of ties together with what we talked about last week.
Guys got any questions there? If you can master this concept, you're going to be a good referee, and it's not going to happen in your first week. Right? Okay, so guarding a moving opponent who doesn't have the ball, right? So they're doing a fast break, and this guy's running down the sideline, and you step. You want to kind of try to draw a team control foul, and you try to step in front of that player, that freight train coming down the sideline. So what happens here? So now time and distance is required to obtain legal guarding position, which means you need to give that player a chance to stop and change directions to avoid the contact. Okay. Got to give them time or distance to stop. It's really distance to stop to avoid the contact. Distance is no more than 2 steps. So if you've given them 2 steps, you have been deemed to give them enough room to avoid the contact. It might only be 1 step if people aren't moving very quickly, but it needs to be no more than 2. And again, if the opponent is airborne, you've got to get there before the opponent leaves the floor, consistent with if they've got the ball or not.
Question.
Yep.
Is there a separate rule for running your defender into a screen? Your defender that can't see. I mean, that's on the other side.
We're gonna get to screening.
Okay.
Hang on a second. So I've got a couple of clips here. Can everybody see this? Can you see the clip?
Yes, I can see it.
Everybody see the clip?
I see a gray screen, Scott. I don't see a clip.
Yeah,
you don't see the clip. Hang on a second. So I got to get to the right screen share here. There it is. Now can we see this?
Much better.
Okay, it's gonna run. We missed the first part. It's gonna run again here.
Black number 32 receives the ball in the post when white number 15 comes across the lane to contest his try for goal. Black
2 feet on the floor, facing the opponent.
number 32 makes illegal contact with white number 15, who is in legal guarding position. The lead official correctly rules a player control foul against black number 32. Remember to wave off the base.
Okay, let's try it. Let's see another one.
There's no restricted zone, is there?
Who initiates the contact?
There is not. Okay, we're seeing this one now, right?
There's a big gray square in the middle of the video.
Now there isn't.
No, there isn't.
That's better.
Number 15 in blue is dribbling into the lane. Number 34 in white is attempting to maintain legal guarding position on the dribbler when secondary defender number 44 steps up to double team the dribbler. Contact occurs on the torso of number 34 white, knocking her to the floor. Who initiated the contact? Was the defender successful in maintaining legal guarding position? You make the ruling. The ruling official uses the proper stop clock signal and does identify number 15 as the shooter. However, there was no preliminary signal to indicate a blocking foul at the spot of the foul. In addition, the ruling official is moving while signaling.
Okay, so he decided that that defender was not there legally.
Play 14.
Happens quickly.
White number 0 begins driving left. Blue 14 is sliding laterally, playing legal defense. Contact is made, but by which player? White 0 created illegal contact using his left arm and shoulder into blue 14, who was playing legal defense.
Everybody agree?
Yes.
Bad call by the
Play
ref.
16.
So again, so legal guarding position, right? Watch what this player does, and you'll see this play a lot.
Blue number 1 is bringing the ball up the court as well.
Right there. Is he still in legal guarding position right there? No.
My opinion, no.
No.
Moving forward, that arm reaching across.
White number 0 creates illegal contact in the backcourt. The official correctly rules a blocking foul.
Is that a blocking foul or is that a reach-in foul?
Take your pick.
Okay, there's no difference, right?
Well,
There's no such thing as a reach-in foul. Go ahead,
well,
Steve.
we suddenly have reverberation again here.
You guys have some pretty big echo.
I think it went away again. Great. Yeah, there's no such thing as a reach and foul. So it might be a hold, it might be a push, a block, kind of one of those three. You would have your choice of there.
Okay, thanks.
Play 12. Number 5 in blue drives to the basket. Defender number 22 in white establishes legal guarding position before number 5 leaves the floor. The lead official correctly rules a player control foul. However, he should have given the stop clock signal followed by the player control signal.
Okay, everybody see that one as well? I think I got one more here. One more block charge.
Play 14. player number 13 in black drives to the basket, ignoring the carry and the hand checked. Number 22 in white is in legal guarding position and is contacted by number 13 in the torso. The lead is in good position and correctly rules a player control foul, but gives the signal for a team control foul. The proper signal is to raise the arm with the fist to stop the clock, followed by the hand behind the head to signal a player control foul.
I don't know. Was that defender's feet moving right up to impact?
So is that a reason to not have a player? Is that not maintaining legal guarding position if your feet are moving?
And that's why I'm in the class. I don't know.
Right. So we talked about it, right? So you got to obtain legal guarding position with 2 feet on the floor facing the opponent, and then maintaining it. You can move to maintain it. You just can't be moving forward. You can be moving laterally. You can be moving obliquely. You can be moving backwards.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
So to me, it looks as though she's almost like moving her hip in to kind of draw it, or am I seeing that incorrect?
She got hit pretty good because she goes flying. Did she have her right hip over a little bit? I don't know. And the referee is in a great spot.
Yeah.
Right, to have a really good view of that.
So Steve, the old saying of, the defender was in position, that's actually not accurate, right? You don't have to be in position and keep position. You have to be in position. You're allowed to move. You just can't move forward into contact.
Look at all the stuff you're learning tonight.
So I think oftentimes when that comes into play is when there's a secondary defender coming over and they're stepping forward. Oftentimes you see that. This is she's moving laterally. She has her legal position. She's just moving laterally.
Okay.
Great comment. I agree with that.
I had a question whenever you're done explaining this one.
Yep.
That second one we looked at, I was gonna ask something, but we kind of moved on. It was the girls' game, the foul. It was kind of they called a char or a blocking foul. I was wondering if we could take a quick peek at that because I had a question about that.
Sure. Hang on a sec.
While he's looking for that, I'd like to point out to you guys that if you imagine, you remember we talked that when the drives start in the trails area.
Who initiates?
Is this it, by the way?
Hold on a second, Steve.
Good. Yep.
So when the drive starts in the trail area, the trail's responsible for the primary defender all the way to the basket, and the lead's responsible for secondary defenders. And in all these plays, that's exactly how they referee it. The lead official is picking up the secondary defender, which is absolutely correct. Okay.
Is this the play you were talking about right here?
We can't see it.
Yeah, great screen.
Hell. There it is.
Yeah, I think this one's it.
The contact on this play.
This one just seems so, and granted that's in slow motion there, but it seemed pretty slow developing. Like, I guess someone did end up on the ground. Is there a possibility for a no call there?
Well, there's always a possibility for a no call.
Well, I just meant like, was this one very definitive, or because it seems kind of borderline?
It is borderline.
Okay.
Yeah. And the person who ended up on the floor wasn't the one who got fouled.
Really?
Right?
Yeah, it just seemed like something where it was just so slow developing that it seemed like she was there.
Dribbling into the lane.
It didn't seem like either one necessarily.
Number 34 in white is attempting to maintain legal guarding position on the dribble.
That's just my opinion.
When secondary defender number 44 steps up,
I think the actual call here was a
contact
block.
occurs on the torso of number 34 white, knocking her to the floor.
In my
Who
opinion,
initiates the
she's
contact?
there, but
Once
it's
the
also
defender
kind
is
of in slow
successful in
motion,
maintaining
so
legal
that's why
guarding
that
position,
throws it
you
for
make the
a bit of a
ruling.
loop.
And that's okay if you think it's a block, as long as you can justify the call to the coach and you actually saw the defender the whole way. That's not a problem.
All right,
Okay.
let's move on from guarding. Okay, illegal and legal use of hands and arms and freedom of movement, right? So what can you do and what can't you do in terms of, it's not legal to use your hands, the arms, your hips, your shoulders to force your way through a screen or to hold a screener, right? So you can't like shove your way through a screen or you can't, the screener's trying to roll, you can't like hold on to them, kind of obvious, right? You're not supposed to use your hands to inhibit freedom of movement. And a lot of times we've been looking at this in terms of things like cutters going through the lanes and, you know, people holding them up by, you know, putting their arm out, their shoulder out or whatever. You can't extend your arms fully or partially other than vertically such that freedom of movement hinders when contact with the arms occur. Where you might see this is in rebounding, right? Where, you know, defenders have the terrible habit of trying to wrap up the person on their back to not allow them to get to the ball, or just stick their arms straight out to not allow the person behind them to get in front of them. None of that is a legal use of your arms. Can't swing your arms or elbows excessively. Okay, what else you cannot do with your hands? And these are absolutes, so that we used to referee and have a little more freedom to make a judgment about how a defender was impacting of offensive players' rhythm, speed, balance, and quickness. Now they've wanted to clean up the game. They wanted to have more freedom of movement of the game. That's gone from the NBA level down through high school. And
Like
so,
hand
well,
checking?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So like no hand checking, stuff like that?
Yeah, so this is basically hand checking. This is exactly what we're going to be doing right now. So there are absolutes. If you put two hands on the ball handle of dribbler, it's a foul. It's not legal. If you do an extended arm bar on the ball handle of dribbler, it's a foul. No, black and white. If you place and keep a hand on the ball handle of dribbler, it's a foul. So they allow you to, they call it a hot stove, right? You can kind of put your hand out once to measure, then you take it off, and that's no longer a foul. So contact the ball handler more than once with the same or alternating hand. So if you reach out, you kind of do that first touch, it's fine. You pull it off, you put the hand back out there again and touch them again, it's a foul. All four absolutes. And this has probably now been, I don't know, 5 years, something along those lines. Maybe it's been longer, that these absolutes have been in the game, and they definitely have had an impact on the way people play defense. And I was just refereeing yesterday, and I was listening to one of the coaches screaming at his kids about, show them your hands, to kind of show that they were not hand checking them when they were playing defense. Now, they may have been still impacting their freedom of movement by using their body to not let the person get around them, but they were not necessarily hand checking. So kind of get those absolutes in your mind. And when you're out there on the floor, kind of experiment with it. You know, blow that whistle. You see those two hands go on the ball handle with a dribble, bang, whistle them for it. It'll definitely help your play calling.
This counts in the post too.
It counts in the post as well. They are ball handler dribblers in the post.
So did I miss it, or
Play 32.
did we discuss any,
Hang on. Okay.
I was gonna say, did I miss it, or did we discuss like when cutters come through the lane and it's not necessarily the ball handler?
Well, no, I didn't specifically discuss it, but some of that freedom of movement concept, right? So everybody is entitled to their spot on the floor, right? But if you get there first without legally contacting somebody else. So if the cutter is going through the lane, as a defender, you're not allowed to put your arms out and hold that cutter up from going through the lane and holding them off, right? So you know, and that's basically the rule that we just went through that would apply. Do you have a specific question on that?
No,
Chris,
that
just
makes
think
sense.
about
I
legal
mean-
guarding position, okay? So if you're like the lead, let's say, and you're watching people cutting through the key, you know, you just have to see is the defender legal when the offensive player runs into him, or are they not? You know, you just have to have that 2 feet on the floor, torso facing, and just keep looking for that over and over and over again.
And is the defender using their hands, their hands, their shoulders, whatever, their arms to delay movement, to impede freedom of movement of that cutter going through the lane? And if they are, that's a foul.
Wow, that's really good to know, because I mean, we teach that absolutely. You do not let that cutter go without being challenged. You make them go around, you delay them, you harass them, you do whatever to mess up their timing, you know?
That's what I was gonna say.
Well, and you know, there's degrees of all that. But
Yeah.
again, the emphasis has been in the last several years on freedom of movement, more offense, no doubt about it. Giving players the ability to kind of move and run around without being held and being held up.
It's really good to know. Yeah.
All right, this is a closely guarded clip. And it's also showing the defender not hand checking and staying in front of him.
Okay, so
The trail official observes that the defender in white is within 6 feet of the dribbler and starts his count.
There's the one touch.
After reaching 5 seconds and recognizing that the defender is still within 6 feet, correctly rules a 5-second.
Ready to go with that?
Good call.
All right, now we have a couple of hand
actually
checking
touch
plays.
him twice, though. He touched him right at the beginning, and then he touched him again in the middle.
I think in the second one, the official at least felt that he was touching the ball and didn't touch the player.
21.
What
How
do we
many
think about
times
this?
does number 5 in red foul number 1 in white?
There's one.
The official is in good position but allows at least 3 hand checks.
This is the way we used to ref.
There needs to be a whistle on this play as number 1 is clearly fouled. This could also lead to rough play if not ruled.
Fouled a couple times. Yeah.
Ready to go with that?
Is that because he
One more
touched him
hand check.
Play
twice
22.
and with 2 hands?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is that because he kept touching him more than once?
Well, he touched him more than once. He was holding him up with his arms. He was impeding his freedom of movement. There was all sorts of choices there.
Right.
What do you guys have on this play without looking at it again?
I thought
Anybody?
the defender came into the offensive player. She created the contact first before she got shoved down.
Anybody else?
No, I like that one.
I got blocking.
Number 10 in white is dribbling the ball when number 14 in red hand checks her. The trail official coming up the court with the players has a good angle and correctly rules a foul and reports it with the appropriate signals.
I'm actually guessing that's probably the C that made that call, but
We didn't talk about C's.
I know, but
She was extended. Her legs were really wide.
and when she reaches across her body,
Yeah.
she's no longer legal.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you could call that a block or a hand check. I'd probably call it a
Yeah.
block
Yeah.
or a hold.
You can, yeah, my vote would have been hold on that one. When the arm is reaching across the body like that and impeding freedom of movement, I tending to call a hold there, not necessarily a hand check. All right, let's,
Steve, what's the signal you use for a hold? Because I've gotten 2 different messages on that.
who was that just speaking?
Roger.
Roger. So you and I talked about this yesterday a little bit, right? So, you know, it's your arm up. It's your, I don't know if you can see me, but you know, it's your, and you're holding on to your wrist. Some people hold lower on their arm. That's just a matter of style in terms of whether you think you look stronger doing it that way or not. But, you know, one arm up in the air with a fist on it and your arm holding your, you know, your other arm holding your arm, your other hand holding your arm. Sorry.
So what else did you hear, Roger? Besides that,
He was just hearing whether to have it up high on the arm or low near the elbow.
One of the issues is whether or not you use the punch method or the for a block, or whether you use the hand behind the head. Some people still want to use the punch method, or I mean for player control foul. Sorry. Am I getting mixed up?
Yeah, you know,
You are.
this is the bottom line. I wasn't certain last week, but I have inquired, and the signal for either a player control or a team control foul is a punch. So we were practicing it correctly last week, and we will continue to do it that way.
If you look in the rule book, it'll say that it's behind the head, and that's the National Federation is behind the head, but the Washington Officials Association and the WIA is a punch. Having nothing to do with hands and arms, legal or illegal use. Let's keep rolling. All right, rebounding. To obtain legal rebounding position, the player may not displace, charge, or push an opponent. And, you know, I'm old enough where my coaches taught me how to box out by getting in there and just pushing backwards, getting, you know, people moving them out of the way of getting the rebound, right? You can't do that. You can't displace your opponent. You can't extend your shoulders, hips, knees, or arms other than vertically to hinder the freedom of movement. Kind of the very same concept that we just talked about in the previous rule. And you can't bend your body abnormally to hold or displace an opponent, right? So you can't hold an opponent away from getting to the rebound with anything other than your body, and you cannot displace, cannot push them back out of the way from where they were. You know, if they have their position on the floor, you cannot move them to another position on the floor.
So am I right in understanding that, you know, say a defender is, you know, boxing someone out and they're utilizing like their lower half of their body, so like their waist down, but they're like bent over, can they still have their arms out at that point, or how does that work?
Well, the arms can't be used to prevent that defender or from that opponent from getting around them.
Okay, so would it happen as soon as the arm does touch the opponent?
Well, prevents the opponent from getting around them, right? So not just touches it, the opponent's got to be making an effort to get around them, and that arm needs to be being used to prevent that opponent from getting around them.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, the last thing is violate verticality, which, you know, verticality we'll talk a little bit about, but basically anybody standing on the floor has from the floor to the ceiling to the moon. That's their vertical space. Every player is entitled to a spot on the playing floor, provided the player gets there first without illegal contact, which I think I mentioned in one of the other rules. All right, so that was quick on rebounding, and I think my main takeaway on rebounding is no displacement and no holding. Right, in the chaos that ensues as you're watching the rebounding action.
Yeah.
Screening, which right, somebody just asked a question on screening. So what makes a legal screen? Screener can face any direction, doesn't have to be facing anybody. Time and distance are going to be relevant, depending on whether you're screening within the field of vision or not. So screening a stationary opponent from the front or the side, you just need to stop short of contact. Right, so the opponent is standing there, maybe just guarding his player. You can run right up to, but not touch, stopping just short of contact, and set a legal screen. When you screen an opponent from behind, and a lot of times you'll see this right up at the top of the post at the free throw line, you need to allow one normal step before contact. So you cannot go right up to the back of the defender and screen legally. You need to give that defender one step. And I will tell you that we don't do a great job with making this illegal screen call. One step before contact. And then when you're screening a moving opponent, the moving opponent needs time to stop or change directions to avoid the contact. 2 steps max. Kind of similar to getting legal guarding position as a defender, but this is kind of as an offensive screener. So it kind of makes sense. If the screener can see you coming, you can get right up to the screener without creating the contact. And if they can't see you, you need to give them time and or distance. And the distance is 1 or 2 steps, depending on whether it's just a screen from behind or whether if the opponent is moving. Make sense? Screener must be stationary or moving in the same path and direction as the opponent, right? So if the ball handler is out in front on a break and the second offensive player is right behind him, can that offensive player be moving in the same direction as the ball handler, in the same direction as the defender behind him, and still be setting a legal screen? Yes. You know, people say, well, he's moving, he's blocking him. As long as they're moving all in the same direction, it's legal. And that the person behind is the one who's got the responsibility for contact. So, you know, if the screener slows down and the defender runs into them, that's that defender who was causing the contact, not the screener.
Huh. Wow.
And then the screener must stay within a vertical plane. So if you're screening with your legs wide, further than your shoulder width apart, and you cause contact on that leg, then that is an illegal screen.
Makes sense.
If you're screening with your legs wide and the defender runs smack dab into the middle of your torso, we're not calling that an illegal screen, because the thing that stopped the defender was your body, which was in legal position.
Hey, Steve, this is Pambuzi. Can you say that one more time, please?
Very last thing?
Yes. No, before you said if the screener runs smack dab into your torso.
Yeah. Right. So we're looking for screeners that set wide screens. Their feet are wide apart, well past their shoulder width apart. Right. If the defender runs into those legs that are wide apart, that is an illegal screen. If the defender literally runs smack into the guy's torso or the girl's torso, we're not going to call that an illegal screen, because that defender ran into the torso, and the torso was what caused the screen, not the illegal legs that were spread further apart than their shoulder width.
Okay, so just to clarify, if I hear what you're saying correctly, if the screener's legs are more than shoulder width apart, the defender runs into his leg, it's an illegal screen.
Correct.
If the screener's legs are not more than shoulder width apart, because you know how some defenders, they try and fight through screens, like they'll get down low to try and fight through the screen. Yep. If his legs are not shoulder width apart and he still bounces off of his legs, that is still a legal screen.
Correct.
Okay.
And by the way, that defender can't like push his way through that screen, right? So because that would be illegal on the defender, because that screener has the right to that position on the floor.
Yes. Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, one more screening question. So we teach our quick little guards on long rebounds to push the ball and actually use the bigs without them knowing it. To set a screen, so the big's running down, our little guards are super quick. They can catch up to the big and pass the big. And we teach them to use that big as a screen, and the bigs don't even know they're being used as a screen.
Mm-hmm.
So is it intentional? If you're a screener, you're obviously moving and there's contact and stuff. We often wondered about this, and we've never.
Well, it depends on if the big is doing something.
Big's just running, filling their lane, wherever they're supposed to be, running the middle.
And they're fine with that. So they're not doing anything. They're not causing contact, right? So the first thing about an illegal screen is there has to be contact. If there's not contact, there's no illegal screen. So if the big is just running down the floor and then not running into somebody, they're not causing a problem. If they're running down the floor and somebody is running into them, they're also not causing a problem.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Couple of screening
Light 10.
flips.
Is this a legal screen?
Well, what's the answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of yeses.
Room. Did she give enough room?
Because
They
she give her
gave
enough
2 steps.
room. Think they had enough room to give it time and distance?
I think so.
Go back to the beginning here.
Play 10.
Oh, my Lord.
Is this a legal screen?
What a fucking year.
Whoa. What was that? It's supposed to be on mute.
Sorry, I was supposed to be on mute.
Yes, this is a good example of the player in white setting a legal screen. The
Right.
player in blue
More
has
than 2
time and
steps.
distance to change direction.
Perfect.
Does that slight forward lean matter? Like
No.
they're clearly anticipating contact, but would we
Right.
give them that as part of their vertical plane?
There's nothing that says that they can't be leaning forward,
Okay.
right?
Play 11. Is this a legal screen?
Oh, she didn't give her enough room, right? Time and
How many
distance.
steps does she need?
Dude, I
I
thought
think she gave her enough room.
Legal.
Solid.
Yeah, that's
There's the screen right there, right? Basically set.
Her team got a call.
Pretty close.
The officials are in good position to observe the screen set by the player in blue. The screen is legal, no matter the severity of the contact.
But borderline.
So how many
The officials
so-
correctly ruled that this is the legal screen.
What was that question?
I'm trying to understand. So the defender virtually never saw the screener until the last second. So like,
right.
So when you say like 2 feet or 2 steps, like 2 steps starting when?
When you've set the screen.
Oh,
So
when
you've
you
stopped
set the
moving.
screen.
You've stopped moving and you've set the screen.
You know,
Okay.
technically the girl, the defender, should have been able to see the other player in her peripheral vision. And if not, her teammates should have warned her.
But she's still moving. So they still, time and distance is still a factor. But it only is max is 2 steps, right? So to me, there was plenty of time there. Okay. We're almost done with my top 10 here. Throw-ins. So the throw-in count begins when the ball's at the disposal of the thrower, right? Ball's in the thrower's hand, or the thrower is we've placed it on the ground. The throw-in count ends when the ball's released. So we know that there's 5 seconds for the throw-in, right? And it's not 5 seconds from when the ball is touched inbounds. It's 5 seconds from the ball is released by the thrower. When does a throw-in end? When the ball touches a player in bounds or out of bounds. When the throw-in team commits a violation, or when the throw-in team commits a violation, basically, is when the throw-in ends. And that's important when we're switching the alternative possession arrow. The alternative possession arrow switches at the end of a throw-in. Okay, the other thing about this is the designated throw-in spot is 3 feet wide with no depth limitation. So you can go backwards as far as you want, right? And you've got a 3 feet wide width of the designated throw-in spot. And the thrower must keep 1 foot on or over the designated spot. So the thrower doesn't need to stand there and not move. They've got a 3 foot wide designated spot, and all they need to have is their 1 foot kind of over that spot. So if they take a step in one direction or the other, they're still in the designated throw-in spot. If they take 3 steps, they're not, and somewhere in between that is when it's kind of borderline and why you get paid the big bucks. Okay, no such thing as a traveling or dribbling rules during a throw-in, right?
Okay.
So he's traveling. No, she's not. Right.
So
she's
they
either
can-
stayed within the designated throw-in spot or she hasn't.
So if they can shuffle back and forth a little bit and it's fine.
Yep, they can shuffle up, and they can run in place, they can jump around, they can do all sorts of things, and it's all fine. There's no such thing as traveling. Okay. Now, I would tell you that 99 players out of 100 think that they have to stand there and not move. And we don't disabuse them of that.
We're going to talk about throw-ins on Thursday, how to actually do them. So this will all come into play.
All right, traveling.
Steve, none of that relates back to a made basket where they have the run of the end line and the passing within the end line.
Right, because it's no longer a designated throw-in spot. It's an exception to the designated spot where you get to kind of run the end line after a made basket.
Gotcha.
All right, traveling. The key to traveling, and traveling like every other year is a point of emphasis in the rule book, and it is again this year. I called a bunch of them yesterday. Everybody yelled at me. So you got to decide what's the pivot foot.
You and me
Establishing the
both.
pivot foot is key, right? So a player catching the ball with both feet on the ground, either foot can be the pivot foot. That makes sense. Player dribbling or catching the ball while moving. If both feet are off the floor when they catch the ball and they land on both feet, either can be the pivot foot again. If first on one foot and then the other foot, first to land is the pivot foot, which again makes sense. So you've gathered the ball and your first foot to come down is your pivot foot. If on one foot, if one foot comes down, the player can jump off that foot and land with both feet simultaneously into a jump stop, and then neither feet after that can be the pivot foot. So I've gathered the ball, I've got it in my hand, I land on one foot, that's my pivot foot, and then I jump stop onto 2 feet. Now neither foot can be the pivot foot, right? You got to stay there. You're able to jump back up and shoot, but you're not able to step with just one foot. We're going to do this live too, because this is a little hard to do conceptually. And then if one foot is on the floor when you've caught the ball, if the second foot touches the floor, the first foot is the pivot foot. But a player can jump off that one foot that's been on the floor and land again on both feet simultaneously in a jump stop, and neither foot can be the pivot foot. So what you see sometimes is catch the ball, land on one foot, jump stop to pivot foot, jump stop to 2 feet on the floor, and then somebody wants to take a step through to go and make a layup, and that's when they travel. Okay, so you can jump stop onto both feet, and don't be too precise as to whether or not the feet hit simultaneously or not. That's, damn close is close enough, right? So it's paramount to know which foot is the pivot foot. The pivot foot can be lifted, but can't return to the floor before the ball is released for a shot or a pass, right? So it's not that the pivot foot got picked up, it's that the pivot foot came back down again, and that's what causes the travel. And you must not be able to pick up the pivot foot before you start your dribble. So if you're dribbling, the ball's got to be released before you start to dribble. If you're passing or shooting, you can't, once the pivot foot comes up, it can't come down. So that's why sometimes when you see a kid go up for a shot and is getting defended and they drop the ball to the ground to try to go dribble as opposed to shoot or pass, that's not legal because the pivot foot came up before they started their dribble.
So they cannot pass the ball at that point?
They can pass it. They can pass it or shoot it, but they can't dribble it. The kid jumps for a shot. There's a defender right in his face. He goes, it's going to get blocked. So he puts it to the floor. I actually just saw it in the NBA game like yesterday I was watching in an attempt to kind of dribble as opposed to shoot. And that's not legal because the pivot foot came off the floor before the start of the dribble.
Okay, but they can do like a bounce pass so long as it's not an intentional dribble. Okay.
They can pass. They can pass or shoot, or call timeout, or request a timeout. Okay, so a player holding the ball can't touch the floor with any other part of his body except for his hand or a foot. So if they stumble and they put their hand down and touch the floor, that's fine. they put their elbow down onto the floor, it's not fine. And after gaining control while touching the floor with other than the hand or foot, you can't attempt to get up or stand unless you dribble first, right? So you gather the ball and you're on your knees. You can start dribbling and stand up, but you can't stand up and then start dribbling. And while you're on your back, you may sit up without violating. And you can't roll over. So after you can slide on the floor to recover the ball. After your slide has stopped, you can't roll over to kind of avoid the defender or be able to make a pass or whatever. Traveling is key. All right. Travel or not?
See, it happens fast. You guys have to have an opinion.
No.
I think you might have taken action.
Number 10 in red recovers a loose ball and dribbles the length of the court. He ends the dribble and jumps off his left foot, which is his pivot foot,
Got both two hands on the ball. Bang, bang.
and
back on
returns his
pivot
foot to the floor before shooting the ball. This should have been ruled a traveling violation.
Okay, I'm kind of flying through some of these things so we can see a few.
Is this a traveling violation? Number 3 in white dribbles the ball down the court. Ends his dribble establishing his right foot as the pivot foot. Spins, lifts the pivot foot, and retouches the floor with his right foot before he passes the ball. This is a traveling violation. Not ruling a travel on the last two plays gives a big advantage to the offensive team, who scores on both plays.
You know, I called this yesterday, and every player on both teams and all the fans told me it was a bad call.
I have consistently done it in the last 3 weeks, and I have consistently gotten that message. Most players at the high school level are not strong enough to make that spin move and do it legally. I've got another one. I think another spin move travel here.
I have a question.
Is this a
Good.
When do you determine? I've heard, I haven't ref that much since this has become a bigger thing, but I've heard the gather has become kind of one of the hardest things to referee for like traveling and stuff.
Well, right. So you need to know when the dribble has ended, right? And you kind of can go look up the definition of when the dribble ends. But essentially, it's like when the ball comes to rest in one hand, or there's two hands on the ball. And so you got two things you're doing when you're kind of determining whether there's a travel or not. It's like, when did the gather occur, and what foot became the pivot foot after the gather occurred, right? And at the speed that some of these games are played at, that is a challenging thing to do. And I would probably say that if you're unsure, you probably want to pass because you're not sure of the violation. But as you train yourself, as you work more and more games, you're able to come up with when the gather happened, what pivot foot was, which pivot foot it was, and then whether that pivot foot was taken off the floor and put back down again. But the gather is clearly key. And the gather kind of happens, more so the bigger the hands, the more so some of these players are able to kind of keep the ball without necessarily gathering it and still be able to move. You've got hands that can palm the ball. You can keep the ball below your, without having it come to rest in your hand. That's where not that many high school kids can do it, right? You see it more at the college and pro level.
Go play.
Need travel?
Yes.
Well, it said travel on the file clip, so I want to say yes.
Number 24 in blue ends his dribble on his left foot. Takes a step with the right foot, establishing the left foot as the pivot foot. He proceeds to lift the left foot and places it back on the floor before attempting a try for goal. This is a traveling violation.
All right, one more.
Play 29. Is this a traveling violation?
Yes.
Kind of easy, right?
Number 1 in green drives the lane and jumps in the air with the ball. Defensive player number 35 in white appears to get a hand slightly on the ball. Number 1 returns to the court with the ball. This is a traveling violation. In this play, the touching by the defensive player has no bearing on the ruling, as number 1 in green maintained control and returned to the court with the ball.
All right.
I'm in the Zoom meeting for the reference.
Marlon, you have
You
something?
might want to mute yourself.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, verticality. I think this is the last one we got going on rule 4.
Hey,
So
Steve,
verticality.
before you hit this one, I just want to put in a plug for those traveling videos you found last year. If you look on the Apprentice website, in the section where there's like recordings of the classes and stuff, on the right side in that section, there's a whole bunch of traveling plays that I think it would be cool if you guys could look at, because it's all the stuff Steve just showed you, and it helps you get your eyes trained.
And what's interesting, it's kind of done from the concept of almost the coach teaching the players what's legal or not, as opposed to necessarily what the referee is looking at. Okay, so verticality, legal guarding position must be obtained and maintained. We talked about what that is. The defender can jump and occupy the space in the vertical plane. Hands and arms can be raised within the vertical plane. And the player with the ball has no more protection or consideration than the defender. So we do not want to penalize the defender for going straight up the air and playing defense, okay? And the offensive player running into him. And just because they're jumping, it doesn't make that defender illegal, because he's still in his own vertical plane. And what vertical plane means is, you know, when their arms are straight up in the air and then their arms come forward just a little bit, to me, that's still in the vertical plane. But what you're watching for is those arms are straight up in the air and then they come at like a 45-degree angle where they're trying to, you know, make a block or something. That then takes it out of their vertical plane. Does that make sense?
Hey, Steve, this is Roger. So if a tall player
Play 20
is standing there with his arms straight up,
yep,
offensive player bumps him in the chest, and that causes him to, you know, lean forward, initiating the contact, and the small player then jumps up into the arms. Would that really be a foul?
That's a really good.
defender,
That's a
or
really
would
good question. And
I mean,
you
it's
can
initiated.
sometimes. Right. I understand your comment. Right. So obviously, if the offensive player hits the defensive player hard enough, that can be a player control foul. And if all that has happened is that player goes from being straight up in the air to bending forward to kind of absorb the blow, my vote would be that's still in their vertical plane. But it's all judgment. Is like, so is that what happened, or was that defender also moving their arms forward to go make a block? Right. And again, that's what they pay us for the big bucks for, right? To make those kind of judgment calls. If it's solely because of the fact that he took and absorbed the blow from the offensive player and that made his arms move forward a little bit, if it made his arms move from you know, straight up into the air to a 45-degree angle, then it's probably a foul on the offensive player. Or the defender is kind of moving his arms purposefully to be able to try to make a play, and has gotten out of his vertical plane. Okay. So was he vertical?
No, because he came down with his arm.
Not sure what the push was, but
Is this a foul? Number 11 in red drives along the end line, ends his dribble and attempts a shot. A foul is ruled by the lead official. It appears that the defenders go straight up and block the shot. In slow motion, it looks like red number 11 actually steps back into the defender. The questions are again, what did the defender do wrong and who caused the contact?
tough call. Tough to lay off that call. All right, I think that is my rule 4 finale. Anybody, any more questions on rule 4 for tonight? You got a lot thrown at you on an hour and 10 minutes or so. I am going to do a speed rule 1 and rule 2, I promise. So we get us out of here in the next 10 minutes or so. Any other questions on rule 4? Okay. Rule 1, court and equipment. The first thing I would say about this is you're basically going to deal with the court that's out there that you've been assigned to. You're not going to worry about whether the dimensions of the court are right or anything along those lines. You're just playing the court that's there. You want to make sure it's safe. And if you've got any real concerns, you want to talk to whoever the game manager is there, but you're not going to worry about that the distance to the free throw line is 15 feet or, those types of things. The things you might deal with, the ball, 2 different size balls. The boys' high school ball is 29.5-inch circumference, and the girls and for younger players is 28.5-inch circumference. Make sure you know which ball should be used. And the smaller ball will have stamped on it 28.5. The bigger ball might not. And I promise you, if you work kind of when you get to kind of doing the high school games, you're doing a freshman JV game and a freshman girls game and a freshman boys game, somewhere along the line, you'll ref with the wrong size ball. We all have. But keep it in your mind, what ball should we be using? Team bench location, the
Sorry,
coach
Steve, real quick.
Yep.
For the ball size, doesn't junior high use the 29.5-inch for the boys?
28.5 typically. Usually the smaller ball. And again, you know what? When you walk into the gym, just make, you can ask the question, what size ball are we supposed to be using here today? But the junior high games are normally the 28.5. Okay. Coach's box, depending, when you're doing your rec games or whatnot, you're thankful that the coach is staying on his side of half court. Technically, it's 28 feet up from the end line, and it's out of bounds, which means the coach is not supposed to be standing on the floor. It's supposed to be standing off the floor. When you're in these tight gyms and there's no place to stand, you want to have some degree of latitude there, but know what the rule is in terms of what the coach's box should be. And then the timeout area extends from the coach's box to the nearest free throw lane line. So you can meet out on the court up until you get to the first lane line of the free throw lane lines. They put an X in front of the scorer so that the players know where to check in. Again, you won't see that in any of your rec games, and hopefully you'll see them in the high school games, and you may not see them in many junior high school games either. And that's basically all you need to know of rule 1. And then officials and then duties in rule 2. The thing I highlighted in 2.8, penalize unsporting conduct by team members or coaches. You're in charge of keeping the game correct out on the floor and the participants out on the floor. You're responsible for them, but you're not responsible for what's happening outside the floor. So game management's responsible for spectator behavior. And again, if you're in these rec situations, you're going to put the responsibility on the coach, or there's going to be hopefully a game manager that is going to be there that will identify themselves to you, or you've identified yourself to them when you've gone into the gym. And if you got an issue with a fan, let the game manager handle it, not you. Rule 2.9 has to do with signals, which you're going to do in live fashion, so we're not going to go over it here. And then quickly rule 210, which is correctable errors. My first comment about correctable errors is don't let them happen, so you don't have to figure out what you need to do with them. And here's what can happen to cause a correctable error. You kind of mess up on free throws by either awarding an unmerited free throw. We shot free throws and it was only 6 fouls, not 7. We didn't award free throws. It was 7 fouls and not 6. We had the wrong person shooting them, or for crying out loud, we shot them at the wrong basket, right? And the 5th correctable error is erroneously counting or canceling a score, which could include a 2 versus a 3, that you awarded 2 points when it should have been 3, something along those lines. So if the clock is running, the error must be recognized before the second live ball. And that means you're going to need to know what the definition of live ball and dead ball is, right? So like when the ball goes through the basket on a made shot, the ball becomes dead. And if the whistle is blown, the ball has become dead. So you need to know that you need to recognize it before the second live ball. And here's a little chart. So the clock is stopped. There's a dead ball, the error occurs, the clock starts, and the error has to be corrected by C when there's the next dead ball. Okay. Correctable errors will mess up people with 10 years worth of experience. There's no doubt about it. And I know I can remember kind of the first time I had one, which might have not been to like my 3rd year. I was happy that I had a partner who knew what the hell they were doing. So look at it, try to absorb it. Hopefully you won't run into it in the first few years. And if you do, hopefully your partner will be there to help bail you out a little bit.
Hey, Jacqueline, speaking about this, you were asking about, did you need to read the rules book or the case book? For the correctable errors, I would advise all of you to read them in the case book because it makes so much more sense than what Steve just told you. What he just told you is probably like blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the case book, it'll make a little bit more sense.
Okay.
All right, rule 1 and 2 was easy, right? I spent an hour and 15 minutes on rule 4, and rule 1 and 2 we spent like 3 minutes on, right? And that to me is what the ratio you should be spending on rule 4 versus rule 1 and 2. Anybody got anything else? Who won the game?
Don't tell me.
Uh-oh, never mind. I wasn't watching.
We can.
Everybody good?
Don't tell me. What I do want to say is, so we've gone through these 3 rules, and next Monday we're going to review the quizzes. And how we review the quizzes is that we go over the questions that were most missed. So please try to submit your quizzes before next Monday so that we can have a productive review session over the questions that people had a hard time with. And then next week, after the review of the quizzes, then we'll go over the next 3 rules, and then the following Monday we'll review them. So that's kind of the way things work with the rule side. And for everybody else, Thursday we have our second on-court session. We're going to cover throw-ins, timeouts, and jump balls, and it's a lot. So try to get there on time. And thanks, Steve.
See you guys. Thanks for the questions. Good job tonight. A lot of good questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.